Hi, I'm Richard Vague with Tychos. A very recent chart for the popular internet newsletter The Daily Shot Brief lamented that home sales were at a multi-year low. And on October 23rd, the Wall Street Journal blared, quote, "Home sales on track for worst year since 1995. September sales fell 3.5% from a year earlier. In 2023, home sales hit their lowest point in 30 years, end quote. Well, this all points us to a set of statistics around U.S. housing, which we view as the single most important set of statistics we have to study to truly understand the direction of the U.S. economy. Real estate is the largest private sector component of GDP, and real estate loans are nearly half of all private sector lending. So if you understand real estate trends, you will have a good sense for the overall future trends in the economy. And contrary to what the Daily Shot numbers and the Wall Street Journal headline might suggest, the story the real estate numbers now tell is somewhat encouraging. First, let's examine why home sales are low. Well, one reason is that mortgage interest rates are high. At 6.5%, they are much higher than the level of 3.6% just before the pandemic, and they're the highest they've been since 2008. New buyers can't afford homes as readily with rates this high, and current mortgage holders don't want to sell because if they do, most will be giving up a low-rate mortgage and replacing it with a much higher-rate mortgage. But while these mortgage rates are a big factor, they can't be the only factor, since they were just as high during the 2000s, which was the biggest housing boom in decades. The other more telling reason home sales are low is that there aren't enough houses available to buy. The current inventory of houses for sale stands at 1.2 million, which is well below the more normal level of 2 million that characterized the years before the global financial crisis buildup. So we probably have about half as many homes for sale as we should. And speaking of the global financial crisis, it was caused by the massive buildup of over 4 million homes by 2007. Far too many homes and almost 4 times the number we have for sale today. With this chart, you can easily see what happened. The construction line shows the wild excess in home building in 2005 and 6, and the inventory line shows the resulting egregious excess of unsold houses reached by 2007. Why did builders keep building with that excess? Well, because lenders kept lending, and that's really the usual pattern in a crisis. Then the plunge in construction shows that home building came to a screeching halt because with the excess inventory, lenders finally woke up and the home building and home lending couldn't really restart until a big chunk of that housing inventory had been sold off, which did not happen until roughly 2015, 2016 or so. That's why the recovery took so long. Now here's the punchline. Housing construction is still low by historical standards. It's never really regained the level that characterized the decades before the GFC buildup. For years, we were generally spending around 1.5% to 2.5% of GDP on single-family home construction per year, and that averaged about 2% and then reached a peak of 3.5% of GDP right before the financial crisis. But in the last 8 months, average construction spending has been well below that at just under 1.5%. That's the exact opposite of the situation that existed leading to the GFC, when spending exploded from 2.5% to 3.5% in just 3 years, which means that far too many homes were built. Now we're building far too few. So we will need to boost home building to meet the need, and that's fundamentally great news for future GDP. We always talk about this, when you have a low supply, that's great news for future growth. If we need to boost supply in the largest sector of the economy, it means that overall GDP growth is unlikely to drop very far if it drops at all. Of course, the key lever in how much growth will occur is interest rates themselves. Home builders have to borrow to buy new homes, and individuals have to borrow to buy them. So the lower the interest rates, the more that this new home building and the overall economy will respond. That was not true in the GFC. We had 4 million unsold homes. It didn't matter how much interest rates dropped. Builders weren't going to build and their lenders weren't going to lend until the excess inventory was absorbed. In fact, you could argue that, ironically, the historically low interest rates we saw following the GFC and during the pandemic were too low, especially after the first year or two following the crisis, since they inflated home values, making them even harder to afford, while not, at least in that early period, providing any incentive for additional building. That's it for this week. Thanks.